Here we go then, the 4th generation BMW R9T. Great news for us because we know we love these machines. We're a little bit worried that it was getting a bit long in the tooth, maybe wasn't going to carry on going through all of the Euro emissions tests, etc, but BMW have come through. Now the new bike's got a very sort of similar profile, but there's a lot going on underneath the chassis, some new technology, so let's get stuck in and see what they've done. Okay, cool, so first impressions of the bike. I'm sold on it. I can see that it's different. You know, sometimes we don't like change, do we? I can see there's some covers on here and some smooth surfaces that aren't necessarily what we had on the old bike. I do like that the old bike looked a lot more stripped back and raw than this one. And this does feel, I'm going to say, it feels a little bit plasticky, a little bit like, oh, here's a lot more cast parts that we didn't have on previous models. But I'm willing to look past that because we know that what we do is customise bikes, and half of that's probably going to be going at some point. I'm itching to get this back to the workshop and see what can happen. I do think aesthetically there are some really, really good upgrades. I do think it looks more solid. I do think it looks a little more modern. I know there's a bit of a discussion whether modern is good when you're looking at some of the heritage range. Is that kind of contradictory to what it should be? But actually, I like the new yokes. I like some of the other parts, and we're going to delve into those in a little bit more detail. Okay, so the cockpit of the new R12 nineT. I'm a big fan, to be honest. So this is going to be a slightly divisive point. For me, I'm all about technology. Now, I know the whole custom scene has kind of grown out of basically like, I want to take a bike, I want to strip everything off of it. But for me, I also like to be able to use the bikes. And a lot of the stuff that BMW added to the new R12 nineT are things that I'm going to want. Things like the new scroll screen that works with the new TFT screen. It's just smart. It makes things a little bit easy to read. Certainly if you're doing those longer nighttime journeys and things like that. So for me, I haven't got a problem with it. I do think that there's a bit of a cross in the roads here where if you're a bit of a purist, a bit of a classic bike nut, maybe someone who had an R80, R100, something like that, you're going to approach the cockpit very differently. You're not going to want all of these extra mod cons and everything else. You want a stripped back bike because the bike is for riding, and all you need is an engine between your legs, 2 wheels on the floor, and you want to go, and that's as much you need to worry about. If, however, you are approaching this from somebody, for example, who has been a GS owner, somebody who's been on S1000R sports bikes, for example, for most of their life, or other sports bikes really, have come to this, you're used to the fact that you've got the nav with the wheel, you're used to the fact that you've got the cruise control, you're used to the fact that you've got the riding modes. Now the riding modes on this, standard as the Gen 3, we've still got the sport, we've got the dynamic, we've still got the standard road mode, and we've got the wet mode. I think they're great. I use them all the time on my Gen 3, that sort of thing. If you're used to it as a technology from a modern bike owner, but maybe the GS is a little bit too tall now, or maybe you don't need a 200 brake horse on the road, and you're realizing that actually this now has everything that your BMW already has, only it's light, it's nimble, it's fun, it's cool, everything else. I think that's a good thing. So the aesthetic of the cockpit, I like the TFT, I like all the technology, it doesn't bother me at all. There's some similar touches here. We've got the same mirrors. A lot of people tend to go for the aftermarket bar ends or for some, maybe Motor Gadget mirrors. I think that will keep happening. I've still never been sold on this shape, if I'm honest, personal preference. The master cylinders are all the same, etc. The yokes are very different. The forks, they're still the 55mm forks. They've got different caps on them. We've got different yokes. I think the yokes are slicker. It's almost got more of the R18 setup to the yokes. I think they're cool. I think they're clean, and actually I think it's part of the one of the parts of the bikes from the previous models that kind of did need an upgrade. It's like it's all well and good saying it's the new R9T, it's the new R9T, it's the new R9T. It got a little bit stagnant. One other thing that for me also comes in sort of related to the cockpit is the fact that the new tank is 30mm shorter than the previous. Now that means you can really shuffle your weight much further forward on it, and actually everything just feels a little bit more like it's underneath you. We did find before, because the R9T it notoriously had such a long tank, there was quite a bit of reach for some people. This shuffles you forward, it means everything's underneath you. It does make things feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more like you're able to deal with things, put the bike from full lock to full lock. It does also mean that if you wanted to go for any sort of clip-on options, you're much, much closer. Now we know the Racer had the further forward drop bars on them. A lot of people bought them and weren't too keen on the riding position. We certainly get a lot of people buy the clip-ons from us, and then I'm not going to say instant regret, but we do find people sort of, it's not what they're expecting when they were buying the clip-ons. Now, they're a lot further forward. Some people love it. I'm actually a big fan, but there are other riders out there who bought them thinking it will look cool for a cafe racer, but it it detracted from the comfort, which meant that actually they ended up going back to the standard setup. Now, being able to shuffle myself forward here means that a clip-on option is definitely back on for this, and BMW has shown an option bikini fairing for the R9T model of the R12, and that's going to look great with the clip-ons on, bikini fairing on. It's going to give that real cool heritage cafe racer look. The reason for this R12 nineT sort of name, which sounds a little bit unusual, I'll be completely honest, is because what they're trying to do with the nineT, previously now R12 range, is to make the R12 and the R18 more sort of harmonious as like the bigger sibling, younger sibling type thing. So that's why we've now got an R12 nineT. So the chassis on this, the frame, has been completely redone. This is now one piece frame. Previously, you'd have a couple of points here. You'd have the front frame and the rear frame. So things like our airbox removal, you remember the video, it's an hour-long tutorial. All of this has got to come off. That's changed. This is a single frame, but that does mean that the rear frame is able to come off. So if you hark back to maybe some of the R80, R100 builds back in the day, some of the more heritage sort of like classic BMWs, you were able to take those off, and a lot of custom mods decided to take that off and put a short chopped frame on there. Now that's obviously something that Stu and I are going to be looking at and very, very interested in doing. Whether we get a chance to do it now, we're not going to know until we're back in the workshop, but it's definitely something there that's got our juices flowing to see what we can do that's different to the current nineT, where it is much less possible. We had to sort of start looking at chopping and changing things, which a lot of people within a warranty, etc., weren't necessarily too keen on. So on top of the frame, we've then got the suspension. So the new rear shock, or the rear shock is mounted in a new way basically. Instead of being up and down like this, it's mounted like this. That's obviously to give you better road use, better, more comfortable conditions, etc. That's been matched up front with the same or similar 55mm forks as the previous model. The brakes come with a monoblock caliper, same master cylinders, so you should get that little bit more bite. We've put the monoblocks on our race bike. We actually went for HP4 ones, but these are going to do a really fantastic job, and they're going to work with the ABS Pro too. On top of that, you've got the standard 17 rear, 17 front wheels. They've got exactly the same size as before. The wheelbase has stayed similar. It's not as long as the R12 is. The R12 has got a longer wheelbase. This is stuck with the standard to give that same brilliant manoeuvrability that we know these bikes can offer. So, one thing we are extremely grateful for is that BMW have kept our little air oil cooled baby. They've not gone liquid cooled, and that's great news for us. Something we love about this bike is it still carries that heritage. It hasn't gone quite too far down the I want to be a 2025 spaceship. It's stayed within the R9T character. Excellent news for us. Obviously, it's been slightly redesigned. You can see here, for example, the aesthetics have changed. They've still got the fly-by-wire throttle bodies as per previous. This bike is pushing out 109 brake force. That's the same as the previous model, Gen 3. Stu is doing a video on the R12, the sort of cruiser version. His version is actually 95 brake horse, which allows you to restrict it to an A2 license. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, it's good, but it's not going to be my first bike, it's not going to be my second bike, there is now an option within the BMW range to say, I can learn on one of these and then have it unrestricted at the dealership and go and ride it. It's a fantastic new thing that BMW have never been able to do on these platforms before. Behind that, we've got the same 6-speed box. This does have an option of Shift Assist Pro, so you've got a quick shifter up and down, which is also a beautiful thing. We've managed to get them onto the Gen 3 bikes by speaking to RS2E. You can get them as an optional extra on these bikes now too. Outside of that, final drive, etc., as per on previous models. The exhaust, you've now got a pre-muffler, there's no flap, so it is going to sound different. We obviously haven't been able to start one up yet. The bike's only just come out this week, but we're very excited to see what it sounds like. We think it's going to be quiet. We think it's going to be quite tame, if I'm honest, a little bit timid. So we're going to look to see what we can find, both aftermarket options and maybe ourselves, to open it up and really get this true beauty singing like it should. There we go then, the R12 nineT. Now this is, I would say, more of a revision than the R12. That's kind of a much more new model. However, the revisions have all been in the right places. I'm a bike rider. When I like to ride long distances. I like the pain of it. I'm just one of those guys, bit of a sucker for it. I love the new technology that we're going to get on this bike that means that when I'm on those longer journeys, I've got everything I need. I like the fact that they've returned to having the DIN socket and the USB. A lot of people were upset that the DIN disappeared on the last model. So yeah, for me, I'm a bit of a sucker for the tech side of things, and I think it's going to be fantastic. However, I'm also mad excited to strip a lot of it off and see how we can work with stuff for customer builds too. Main thing that I'm looking forward to, you've got this big sort of old school toaster tank style look. You've got the frame that could be lobbed off. All of a sudden, we can start to look at this as maybe being one of those, you know, the classic sort of like the bike shed, the cafe racer scene when it kicked off 10, 15 years ago. We've kind of got more of an option here to make a modern version of one of those. Now that is going to be something that is definitely going to make me want to come into the workshop and get stuck in every day.